The first of Cécile Chaminade's Études de concert from Joanne Polk, a lovely and boisterous scherzo. And now, our very special guest here as part of our International Women's Day celebrations, Holly Harris. You might recognize her name from the Winnipeg Free Press, of course, but she doesn't just write for the Free Press. You might see articles from her in Symphony Magazine, Dance International, The Dance Current, Opera Canada, Opera Today, Classical Voice North America, and even the Canadian Encyclopedia. But did you know that she may be a culture writer, but she began as a musician and as a composer. She's also an established librettist and cultural analyst. Holly Harris, welcome to Classic 107.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm very happy to be here, and happy International Women's Day to you.
It is such a wonderful day to bring an awareness to composers we don't often have enough awareness of, right?
Right.
So, hey, as a cultural analyst now, you write quite a bit, not just about music, but also about dance and the relationship of music and movement and sound and movement. Does that inform your work as a composer? Or is it the other way around, do you think?
In terms of the journalism?
Well, just in terms of analysis and your understanding of music.
No.
No. Okay. Well, let's talk about it then. That's great.
I think, to do what I'm doing, I have the great honor and privilege of being really immersed and steeped in music all the time. I think when it comes to your own creativity, that does come from yourself. I'm sure there is some kind of influence there, but I don't think about it consciously. I know there's some common denominators. For example, if you see an operatic production, I actually got my start in theater, writing for theater.
Okay.
And, I've been told that I have a, dramatic sensibility. So I think there are some common denominators, but it isn't really a conscious process.
Okay. Well, tell us a little bit about your work with dance, because we'll talk about your choral workings later. But how did that genesis begin? Like, how was that? How were you introduced into making music for the dance scene?
Okay, that's a good question too. Dance is very near and dear to my heart. I used to take dance lessons like many kids did. You're sort of going between music and dance. And so I always had, I think, an affinity for it. And it came down to one day I saw a local choreographer, Gail Peterson-Hyale's production. She had a wonderful, wonderful piece called Breaking for Light, performed at the Gas Station Theatre.
Okay.
And in those days, we had cassette tapes. And it was like one of those great stories. I went up to her at intermission after seeing her show. I had my little cassette tape, like my sampler tape, and I said, I am so, I'm responding to your work so powerfully. I would love to work with you. And she said yes.
Amazing.
And the rest is history. And I have scored for choreographers across the country, a little bit into New York. And that was really the beginning. So it began with a cassette tape.
I think that's a pretty epic story. It's a very hip, it's a very a vintage hipster story.
Well, I'm feeling very old right now. So
no, you should feel like a hipster is what you should feel like. Oh, Holly. So there was a great little bit about your dance writing on the Dance Current there's this great quote. May I read it? Would you mind?
Please.
As a dance composer, I was privileged to be intimately involved in the process of making dance. As a dance writer, I'm still intensely involved with the art form, but from a different perspective. It's a joy to step inside so many wonderful dance artists' worlds and discover what drives them to create. Do you do the same with the musicians that you write for?
I think so, although it's a little bit different. We're kind of talking about apples and oranges here,
right,
a little bit. I would say how that would apply is the many really incredible interviews I have the privilege of doing with these amazing artists. And I have to say, I think last time we were chatting over microphones, Sarah, I was the one asking you questions.
That might be true.
So it's a treat being in the other place here. So I would say so. And in the course of this work, I never lose the just this awe really for the artists who are creating out there. If you're reviewing or talking to the choreographers or dance artists, that's a different kind of awe. Just for the sheer physicality of what they're doing. With musicians, of course, it's also equally physical, but it's just a slightly different perspective.
Totally. So speaking of that, why don't we dive into a little bit of your music? Because I have to say that I had never heard your work before today.
Okay, well, I guess today's the day.
Today is the day. And the first recording that we're going to share of Holly's music comes from a recording that was made in '99 by the Winnipeg Singers. Can you tell us a little bit about this song of Love and Longing?
Sure. The piece itself is called Songs of Love and Longing, and that was my own title. It's a pastiche of different texts, and I created it it was commissioned by Winnipeg Singers way, way back on the cusp of the millennium, 1999, and it was really what I was trying to do is create the sense about love in your life, and if you lose it, as we all have had our hearts broken, that it's really this sense, the intensity of that experience, and how sometimes we feel closest to those that we love in dreams. So it's a little bit along those lines.
Well, here we have the Winnipeg Singers with an excerpt from the Songs of Love and Longing of our own music writer and composer, Holly Harris. Holly Harris, Songs of Love and Longing from the Winnipeg Singers, a recording made in 1999. And here she is in the studio, the Winnipeg Free Press music writer, as well as for lots of other things. She's not just a music writer. She is also a dance writer, a culture writer, and a composer and musician. Holly, it's such a pleasure to have you here in the studio, especially on International Women's Day.
It's a great day, Sarah. Enjoying being here.
So, okay, we have to talk about this. Now, your choral works, you're going to have a choral work featured on Sunday, April 10th at Crescent Fort Rouge United Church. The Winnipeg Singers are collaborating with Groundswell to present a program of works by Diana McIntosh, emerging composer Scott Jodin, and you.
Yes.
And we will hear a little excerpt from why don't we just hear the whole thing at the end of our time together today. It's called Earth Prayers. Again, you can check that out. gswell.ca is where you can find the information. Sunday, April 10th, 7 p.m. at Crescent Fort Rouge United Church at 525 Wardlaw. But now we have to talk about the article. Now, Karen Sunabaka, composer and curator, and Cleo Palacio Quintin, who were actually here for the last Groundswell installment at Cinematheque. We had a great chat about the article that appeared in the Free Press about this year's New Music Festival and the quote, underrepresentation of female composers. Now, there's something that we just chatted about briefly, but you were talking about writing the article, and as it was unfolding, I mean, you don't pick your headline. Is that right?
The writers do not pick their headlines.
That's
correct. Yeah.
So tell us how that article did unfold, because, I mean, it had really great stuff about the New Music Festival, what was happening.
Well, I have to say, Sarah, and I would really like to go on record that I thought this year's Winnipeg New Music Festival, as the 25th anniversary milestone festival,
absolutely,
quarter century, I thought it was a really, really fine festival indeed. And they have a wonderful history of introducing us to composers we might not otherwise hear. So, bravo to the Winnipeg Symphony Orchestra for that. However, where were the women?
Yeah.
And when I started writing the article,
yes,
that, I started at a certain place just doing, like a post-mortem of the whole and the entire festival. I did go to every night's concert. And as I was writing, it was really, coming even more clear to me that if you crunch the numbers, 3 out of 19 were women composers. So objectively speaking, the numbers speak for themselves. And I felt the point needed to be made. And so that's what I did.
Well, and good for you for making it. Those of us who read the article and responded so strongly, it ended up going viral on Facebook. I mean, Karen shared it. Cleo, I know she shared it. I shared it. So the premise of the article is really, in past years, let's just talk about that as well. In 2015, the New Music Festival featuring Katie Agos, Carolyn Shaw, Sarah Neufeld, Nicole Lizet, Larissa Kuzmenko, and Southam. At least we had a good half dozen female composers on the program last year. And I mean, so it's not that we have any lack of access to a list, right? So there was also in that article an allusion to the population of the Faculty of Music and the composition faculty at the University of Manitoba from Gordon Fitzel. 40% of the composition students are female. And then tell us about the email that you got from Bramwell Tovey, of course, WSO, former conductor of the WSO, current conductor of the Vancouver Symphony. Tell us a little bit about that.
I had an extraordinary response, I have to say. If not in my, I've been writing for the Winnipeg Free Press for 12 years, and I think the article did go viral, and immediately I had people emailing me and saying, thank you for writing this. It needs to be said, including, I might add, I think it's an important point, from male composers as well. Not just the women, but also the men out there, musicians and composers. And one of the first emails I had, I was quite surprised, was from Maestro Bramwell Tovey, who is now with Vancouver Symphony Orchestra, of course, and is a co-founder with Glenn Buer for the Winnipeg New Music Festival. Right. And I was well, I first would have to pick myself off the floor because, we've never had contact like that in the past.
Oh, really?
I found it very, very validating of the points that I felt I had made in the article.
Absolutely.
Or I hope I had made. So that was one of the emails. I discovered too through the, talking to people off the record, on the record about the article that we... it's like we live in a climate of fear. And I felt I did not mean to be militant. I did not mean to be radical about the points I was making. But all I wanted to do was create a dialogue.
Which you certainly have.
Generate discussion. Let's talk about these issues. Because only through dialogue and then can we reach some kind of understanding and clarification, and then we can move forward.
Absolutely. Now, back to programming female composers. We were just speaking about Gordon Fitzel. He is also a co-curator in the family of the Groundswell Concert Series. And in October, he brought in the Turning Point Ensemble from Vancouver. They premiered, well, perhaps not premiered, but they were commissioned, they commissioned 5 new works from 5 Canadian female composers, and that they programmed on that particular night. All completely dynamic program. I mean, just all these brilliant different voices of the contemporary variety. Some a little bit more cohesive in terms of the classical shine, and some definitely much more progressive, but overall a really fantastic program. Do you think that this is the right direction? Like, we're going in the right direction? Do you think, what do we need to do to change the landscape more?
That is an excellent point, Sarah. I have given this quite a bit of thought. And, there's people who are pro quota, if for lack of a better word,
right,
for increasing the profile of women composers. And some say we don't need to. And we shouldn't be programming women composers based on gender. And I can go either way, to be honest. And I think ideally we don't need to have a system in place where we're saying, okay, we have sort of like tallying up the composers, counting our beans, and say we have, 6 male composers, we'll have 6 female. However, I think until we have kind of normalized, for lack of a better word, the presence of women composers on our programs, that I think I'm going to be bold and brave, and I say, I think we need to really look at that. I don't think that would be something that we would have every year for years and years to come, but I think it's a very good strategy to take so that in future years we don't have 3 out of 19 composers represented on an international festival.
That you could not be speaking a greater truth to a female musician and composer sitting across from you. This is, I think this is a very difficult conversation to have because you don't want to claim exclusivity, but you don't want to force anything upon anyone either, right? So it's this constant balance. But going back to Groundswell, you are, in fact, going to be featured on a program with another Manitoba-based female composer, well, Winnipeg-based female composer, Diana McIntosh, who is actually also curating this Sunday, April 10th concert, which will feature something that we are going to play in just a moment, Earth Prayers by Holly Harris. Tell us a little bit about the work and perhaps what audiences would be able to expect on the concert on the 10th.
Well, Earth Prayers is another piece I composed in the last millennium.
You can't say that. You don't even have to date
aging by the minute.
No,
now.
it's fine.
But that piece dates back to 1997.
Okay,
and it's had a little bit of a history too. And I think that when it was commissioned by a local college here, and I experienced at the time. The censorship, let's say. And as the piece was performed, first of all, it was banned from being performed.
Wow.
Just because I think the content or some of the text, and I think the content or the text is quite, there's nothing
too scandalous about it.
Too scandalous about it. And this certainly was never my intention. But I'm thinking because of the article that I wrote, and I know how much conversation, discussion, debate the article generated, I think the seeds were already there with this choral work. And, I guess I'm happy to say that since that time, it was eventually premiered many years ago, and it has gone on and had a very full and happy life. Touring Winnipeg Singers has performed it a number of times, and it has been recorded professionally by the ensemble. But even something as simple as a capital E on the word Earth was seen as deifying the Earth. So it was quite, as we say, a character building experience. But again, it really impressed upon me, how many years ago, 15, 16, 17 years ago, the need for dialogue. We need to talk about art. We need to talk about these issues. These are important issues, and until we can have an open and frank dialogue, then through that we can reach an understanding.
And then we also speak not just about gender, but about people of color and the gender binary, right? I mean, why are we still in this dichotomic kind of existence when it comes to Western music, when Western culture has invaded the whole world? Why aren't we allowing all of the world to make that Western music?
And the text itself, I might just say that it's really it's a pastiche of Indigenous text, Christian and Jewish texts. So it's really intended as an ecumenical,
beautiful
thanksgiving to the Creator, whatever that may mean to you, for the wonder of the earth that we all inhabit, our home. So that's really how that came about. And I might also say, going through this trial by fire that I felt it was at the time, many, many years ago, one of the one person that came up to me had an Aboriginal woman, and she did come up to me very quietly and said after finally when it was premiered, and she said, "Thank you for writing this piece. This really speaks to me." So, I'm not pretending to be, a medium for any particular culture, but I just thought it resonated with this one person, and therefore, hopefully, it resonates with many more people, including the audience on April 10th.
Music of social change, discussions about fundamental human things that we need to be talking about, these interactions between us, and epitomized, distilled into this work. Go check it out, people. Earth, Sea, and Sky, another installment in Groundswell's 2015-16 season, Sunday, April 10th at 7 p.m. at Crescent Fort Rouge United Church. This Diana McIntosh curated evening featuring this work of Holly Harris, Earth Prayers, here from Prairie Voices and Winnipeg Singers recording. I'm very excited to hear it, and I'm also very excited to have had you here in the studio. Holly Harris, music writer and composer and musician and lovely human being.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm a big fan of yours, too. It's been a pleasure.
It's always a pleasure to have you. Enjoy this moment of Prairie Voices and Winnipeg Singers with Holly Harris's music, and we will be back with more great International Women's Day programming for you.